Hello, welcome to Saturday's edition of Cracking the Cryptic, where today we're going to take a look at a puzzle that's been recommended to us. And this is by a new compiler to the Logic Masters Germany website, who writes under the pseudonym of Phistomefel. And they've been publishing puzzles for the last couple of weeks to rave reviews, so I'm quite looking forward to trying this, I have to say. You can see that the puzzle is a combination of a diagonal Sudoku, or a Sudoku X, which means that we also need to include the numbers 1 to 9 along the two diagonals that are marked, and a Killer Sudoku. So Killer Sudoku, for those of you who are new to it, what we need to do in this cage, for example, is make sure that the highlighted cells sum to 15. And you mustn't repeat a digit in any Killer Sudoku cage. It's an important consideration. A couple of admin points before I try the puzzle. Firstly, please do check out our Instagram account, which is Cracking the Cryptic, if you're interested in the cryptic crosswords, and that's because we are doing a clue a day. Instagram only allows you to do 1-minute videos, so they're very short and sweet, but each day we're covering a clue from the Times, and it's quite a good way of learning, and it's getting some good feedback, so worth checking out if you like cryptic crosswords. And the other thing is that yesterday I uploaded for our patrons solution videos for the 2, or actually the 4 puzzles that we put up for January rewards. So there are the 3 puzzles by Cracking the Cryptic, and also the bonus puzzle by Christoph Seeliger. So there's videos for those of you who sponsor us on Patreon, for which obviously many thanks. Now with that, I'm going to have a look at this. Now do have a go at the puzzle if you have time. Click on the link under the video and try the puzzle. Now, one thing I noticed actually when I highlighted this cage is it sums to 15 in 5 digits, so I know that that can only be the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Those of you who are good at Kukuru will know that. So right, so let's have a look at this 30 cage as well. Now, the most important tip I can give you for Killer Sudoku is to remember that the number 45 is your friend. Now, why is 45 so important? Well, it's because every single 3x3 block, every column, every row will contain the numbers from 1 to 9. That's axiomatic in a Sudoku. Now, if you add up the numbers 1 to 9, you get 45. So we're able to do lots and lots of tricks using the number 45. So here, the trick will allow me to identify the value of these 2 cells. Simply, that must be 45 minus the contents of this box, which is 30. So these 2 add up to 15. Now 15 you can do in 2 ways. You can do a 6 and 9 or 7 and 8. So the options for these 2 squares are limited. Now down here, look, we've got another restricted cage. 5 cells adding to 16. Well, that can only be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 6. And that's a nice, clever start, isn't it, from the compiler? Because now if we look at this leading diagonal coming down here, we've got 6 cells on this diagonal that only use the digits 1 to 6. So we know that these digits, or these yellow squares, must be the numbers 1 to 6 in some order. So these 3 squares must be the numbers 7, 8 and 9 in some order. Now if we can't use 6 and 9 to make 15, we must be using 7 and 8, and therefore that central square is a 9. Lovely, okay. Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful design this. Now let's have a look up at this box, and again use our 45 trick. So we've got 3 cells adding to 12, another 3 cells adding to 12, so those highlighted cells sum to 24. We know the box sums to 45. So these 3 squares must sum to 21 without using a 9. Now there's only one way that works. That must be 6, 7 and 8. Those of you who do sandwich Sudoku will be very familiar with that total. Now, what next? Okay, yeah. So now let's look at this 26 box. 26 in 4 cells is quite restricted. We obviously, there could never be a 1 in this cage. But here, the maximum value I can put in those 2 squares would be a 4 and a 5. Now if I put a 4 and a 5 in those 2 squares, that would add to 9. So these two squares would have to sum up to 17. Now, can we get to 17 in 2 cells? Well, we can, only just, with an 8 and a 9. There's no way I could make these 2 cells larger. So these 2 squares must be 4 and 5, and these 2 squares must be 8 and 9. And if we look at the top box now, look at this 8 and 9, those 2 can't be 8 and 9, so these 2 must be. So these 2 must be 6 and 7 to complete the box. And we can do a little bit more work with the 8s and 9s, look. We know that there must be an 8 and a 9 in these 3 squares just by straightforward Sudoku. So can those 2 squares be 8 and 9? Well, no, because they add up to 17, they're in a 12 cage. So either the 8 or the 9 must be outside the 12 cage, it must be here. And there will be an 8 and a 9 in the 12 cage. So we know that the 12 cage is either 912 or 813. Now both of those options include a 1, so I'm going to make a note of that. This 13 cage, look, it can't be 4-9, it can't be 5-8. There's only one more way of making 13 in 2 cells, and that's 6 and 7. So now, look, we get, again, straightforward Sudoku. These 2 yellow squares at the bottom, they must be 6 and 7 as well. So these 3 squares must be 1, 2, and 3 to complete the box. So this must be a 4 or a 5. And this square is a little bit restricted because this square has to be, the minimum this could be with a 6, the minimum this could be would be a 1, so that adds up to 7, so the maximum that can be is a 4. So this is a 1, 2, 3 or 4. But look, this 14 is, that 14 is very interesting. Because, how do we make 14 in 2 cells? Well, one way would be 5 and 9, the other way would be 6 and 8. 9 here, so this can't be a 9 though. So now let's have a look at row 2 in the grid. You can see here we've got another of these restricted sets. We've got 5 different cells with the options only being 5 different digits, i.e. the numbers 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So we know that in this row the yellow squares are the numbers 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9 in some order. Therefore the other 4 cells must be the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4. So this can't be a 5. And if we look at this carefully, only one of these cells has a 5 in it. It's this one. So that must be a 5, which makes this a 9. That must be an 8. Switch to the cursor. And that must be a 9. So now the 2 9s mean there's a 9 in this 12 cage. So that is very nice because now this square can't be a 3 or a 4. And this 12 cage is a 1, 2, 9 triple. So this square can't be a 1 or a 2, and this 12 cage is a 3, 4, 5 triple. It's very nice, yeah. And because now we know the 5 in this 3x3 block is in one of these 2 squares, whoops, and the 5 here, you can see in this box over here there's 2 positions a 5 can go into. But we know that neither of those is a 5. Okay. Now what next? 5, 5, 5 in one of these 2 squares. Let's make a note of that. I like corner pencil marks to indicate sort of box logic. Central pencil marks are cell logic. So, sorry about this. Let me just stare at this for a moment. Right, yeah, okay, I see. So let's have a look at this diagonal and ask where a 5 can go. I think there is now only one option, because these two 5s have ruled out 5s from these two squares on the diagonal. So this must be a 5. This is a 4, therefore. There must be a 6 in one of these 3 squares for the diagonal. So these two squares can't be 6. And if we look at this box now, because we know that the 12 cage contains a 1, it does not contain a 5. So the 5 must be in one of those two squares. So this square must be a 4, that must be a 5. Now this square can't be a 4. These two squares on the diagonal must be 1, 2 or 3. You can see that just by... We've already got 6, 7, 8, 9, and 4 and 5. Five here means there's now a 5 in one of those two squares, which means this isn't a 5. Yeah, okay, good. It locks a 5 in one of these 3 squares. Now, well, there's only 2 Killer Sudoku cages I've not used. I've not used this 14 cage. You can see that can't contain a 5 or a 9. So let's have a think about that. So it can't. So it could be 8, 2, and 4. Now, is there any reason it can't be 8, 2, and 4? Not sure. It could be 7, 3, and 4. Or it could be 1, 6. No, it can't be 1, 6, 7. That option is ruled out by. If we try and put 1, 6, 7 into this 14 cage, there would be no value for this 13. So this. Right. Okay. So this always contains a 4. Which means there's a 4. That is good. That means that's a 4. Well, I say it's good. It's not actually that helpful. Well, let's have a look at this 14 cage then. So this also can't have a 5 and a 9 in it. So, but this one can be 1, 6, 7. Bobbins. That's not good news. So this can be 1, 6, 7, 8, 2, 4. Oh no, hang on. This can't be 8, 2, 4. Let's just look at that for a second. If this is 2, 4, 8, these two squares would have to be 1 and 3. And now there aren't enough values for these two squares because we've used up 1, 2, 3, and 4 in these squares. So one of these could be a 5, but the other one would have no valid value. So there is no way this can be 2, 4, 8. So can it be... Oh no, and it can't be 3, 4, 7 either for exactly the same reason. Look, there's no value in these two squares. If I make this 3, 4, 7, I remove the 3 and the 4. One of these can be the 5, but the other one will have no value. So this is 1, 6, 7. Therefore, this is an 8. There's no 1 in those two squares. This isn't an 8. There's an 8 down here. There must be a 1 in one of these two positions because the 1s aren't in those two squares. Oh, and that's brilliant. Okay, so now look at this 12 cage. Once we get the 1 in column 2, those two can't be a 1. So the 1 is here. And that means there's a 1 in one of those 3 positions, which is also nice, yes, because now there must be a 1 in one of those two squares. Now once we get 2 corner pencil marks for 2 digits in the same 2 cells like this, we now know these 2 cells form a 1-5 pair, so we can switch that pencil marking to the center of the squares. We know that this square can only be a 1 or a 5. The same is true of this one. So this square is not a 1. And that means, look at this diagonal now. This is the only square that can be a 1 on the diagonal. One. And just let me stare at this for a moment. Now where do we put a 6 in the central box? Well, there's only one available space. That forces a 6 down there. So, that's good. Now the 6, 7 is resolved. This can't be a 6 anymore. So that's a 7 and that's a 6. That resolves the 7, 8 in the middle. This is, I mean, it's gorgeous setting, isn't it? It's just stunning. And now this 8 feeds back into the 9 here. And that's important because now we know that the 12 cage must be 1, 3 and 8. And in fact, we know lots of things now. The 7s force a 7 into the 14 cage. So this 14 cage must be 3, 4, 7 and can't be 2, 8. So we can remove 2 and 8 from that option. 3, 4, 7. These must be 2 and 8. And we know that the 8 must be in the 12 cage. So that all is all fixed. The 2 here fixes the 3 on the diagonal, look. So none of those squares now have a 3 in them. The 3 can be removed from those squares on the diagonal as well. Now what? So we need a 2 into one of these positions. So this is now 1, 2, 6 triple. And this is 5, 8 and 9. Let's remove the 8 from this square. That can't be a 7. The 11 cage, yes, the 11 cage is fixed. Getting the 1 here, well, it's this 3 that fixes it actually, because now if this square is a 2, this square would have to be an 8, and it can't be an 8, so this is not a 2, this is a 4, and this is a 6, that means that's a 7. This must be a 4 now because of simple Sudoku. This is not a 4. I mean, it's 1, 6, 7 here, so this obviously can't be a 1. I should have spotted that before. This is a 1 now. This is a 2, 9 pair, so this is a 1. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Undo, undo. This is a 1. This is a 4, this is a 2. This 4 looks down the diagonal, look. So we can remove those 4s. That gives us a 2 now. That's the only option for this square. We can remove 2 from all the other squares. We've now got a 1, 6 pair on the diagonal. Let's remove 1 from this square. And this 1 is going to fix the order. I love puzzles like this. They have it has such a sort of linear path that we've had to discover. It's led us on a journey that's been absolutely the intention of the setter. But we've had to spot every step in order to sort of make good progress. You can see we've now got a 3, 4 pair here, so this must be a 5. 3, 4 here, so this is now a 7. This must be a 7 by basic Sudoku. One of those two squares must be a 7. This 2 resolves the 2, 9 here. That resolves that this is a 5, and I think, I don't want to speak too soon, but I'm hopeful that we've actually cracked this now. You can see these two squares need to be 3 and 8, which is now resolvable because of the 3 here. 8, 1, 6, 7. This 6 fixes the 6 and the 7 over there. That's 4 and 3 are fixed by this 4. And we still need, now we need to put a 5 somewhere in this column. And you can see there's a 5 there and a 5 there. So that's the only valid position for a 5, which gives us another 5 in the grid, which resolves the 5 and the 1. 4 here resolves the 3, 4 on this side. That resolves the 4 and the 3 in this box. These two squares have got to be 8 and 9. So we've got this relationship between the 8s and the 9s here that will have to be fixed by resolving this 8 and 9. So how do we do that? Just have a quick look and see if we can see a good way of doing it. Let's have a look at this column. We need 1, 6 and 9. So this is a 6 or a 9. This is a 1 or a 9. This, there you go. In fact, that row would have been a better place to look, because this 9 forces the 9 over there. Once we get that, we're going to get everything else. Hopefully that square should be an 8. 3, 6 and 7, so you can see this needs to be the 3. That resolves the 2 and the 3. 2 must be here, the 7 must be here. That forces the 7 up there. Gives us the 6 and the 1. This is a 1, this is a 9, this is a 6. Check, yes. Lovely puzzle, absolutely beautiful. And I think we'll be doing more puzzles by Phistomefel. You can all correct me in my pronunciation, I've got no idea. It sounds like Mephistopheles, but sort of with a different language applied to it. We'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.